Square Enix will aggressively pursue multi-platform strategy and company reboot. Square Enix is rebooting itself aggressively, pursuing a multi platform strategy that includes PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, and PC in the process. This comes from the company's latest financial earnings report, which details Square Enix's 3 year reboot plan for long term growth. Within that 3 year reboot plan, Square Enix has four pillars: enhance productivity by optimizing the development footprint in the digital entertainment segment, diversify earnings opportunities by strengthening consumer contact points, roll out initiatives to create additional foundational stability, strike a balance between shareholder return and growth investment when allocating capital. As part of this plan, Square Enix will aggressively pursue a multi platform strategy that includes Nintendo platforms, PlayStation, Xbox, and PCs, according to the financial report, especially in regards to major franchise and AAA titles, including catalog titles. It will build an environment where more customers can enjoy these titles. It continues, possibly alluding to multi platform release for future Final Fantasy games and more. This strategy switch up follows reports that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, a PlayStation 5 exclusive RPG that launched in February, underperformed. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth followed in the footsteps of its predecessor, Final Fantasy VII Remake, which launched exclusively on PlayStation 4 in 2020, and Final Fantasy XVI, which hit PS5 last year, although it's set to release on PC sometime in the future. Square Enix also says it will devise a platform strategy for SD smart devices PC browser portfolio that includes not only iOS and Android, but also the possibility of PC launches. It continues. Furthermore, the group will strive to maximize the acquisition of new users when launching a title and that of recurring users after storing management of game operation. Throughout the financial reports, Square Enix uses the word fun as a focal point for the future development of its games. It says it wants to focus on the development of titles delivering fun that only Square Enix can create and build. In terms of numbers, Square Enix's net sales are up 3.8% year over year at 2.28 billion this year, with digital entertainment sales up 2.5% at 1.59 billion. However, its operating income, 209 million, is down nearly 27%. These numbers and subsequent strategy shift aren't surprising considering at the end of April, Square Enix canceled some of its in development games to be more selective and focused, which lines up with new philosophy. This likely means we'll be seeing more titles like Dragon Age 11, Final Fantasy 16, and Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth on various platforms, and has games like Foam Stars and the Diofield Chronicle. Only
Mhm.
time will tell, though, and Square Enix thinks it will take 3 years for this company reboot. What are your thoughts on Square Enix's new strategy? Let's check out comments. Um, so let's see. Julian, what the goes better to attempt a pivot than just to immediately start cleaving jobs. Zangmaster goes, look, you're gonna want our games on your platform. It'd be a real shame if something were to happen to your platform. A real shame. Kabish? And
It's a Grand Theft Auto Hitman. What the hell?
Ashman goes, waiting 2 years to port to PC is not aggressive. So what do you think of this new strategy? What do
Uh,
you think of this new strategy? Is it gonna help their sales that have been down, or
it'll help in the short term, in my perspective, at first, and then everything after that'll be unpredictable. Like we're not sure what's going to happen after, let's say, a year after doing this proposal. Because if you were to like have all your Final Fantasy games on all other platforms, it will boost up sales on its launch day and all over time. But then after, let's say, a couple of years after it's releasing all these games, it's kind of like it's gonna be sporadic. You know, it depends on what's going to happen. Are you throwing in other features like DLC, or it's gonna be anniversary edition, or year one edition, or day one edition, whatever it's called, that type of stuff. So, Square Enix, you know, they're known for known as system called SquareSoft back in the day in the 1990s of its Final Fantasy games, especially on Final Fantasy VII.
the good old
So,
days?
yeah, and for some strange reason, it transferred over from Nintendo to PlayStation, Sony PlayStation, since Final Fantasy what 5, Final Fantasy 6, give or take. and then since then it's been on PlayStation Sony for about forgot us how long at first, and then
Yeah.
somehow
When did Final Fantasy VII come out?
1997
Yeah,
September.
because I like, and then I think when they released Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy, well, 4 in Japan, 2 in um the States, as Final Fantasy Chronicles, that was on PlayStation. Um,
Yeah, if I
so
recall correctly.
and that's kind of like when Final Fantasy went from Nintendo to Sony,
Hmm.
because after
So
the
yeah,
yeah, so
yeah.
I yeah, so it's go on.
I just want to say too is that SquareSoft, aka Square Enix, and now the present day, they did a good job in promoting their RPG games for how many years on a couple of the platforms like the mobile game and stuff like that with First Class Soldier, and then back like 2 years ago was First Class Soldier, and then they have Final Fantasy VII remakes. It's 2020, 2021, give or take. Rebirth came out 2 months ago, a month ago, whatever. So more power to them. Then there's also Final Fantasy 16 that came out last year, earlier this year, I think it was. So it was basically like Square Enix is trying to expand its profit margins to other platforms overall for the sake of like boosting their sales in the short term, in my perspective. And then after that, it's just whatever, in my perspective. It's like, you're taking a risk now. Now it's time to take it right now before it's too late because the studios being laid off from different companies. You don't want to be the next, studio or gaming company to be laying off people or to go out of business. So it's in a worse off, scenario. Um, it's iffy, to go multi-platform for the first time in a while, other than turn to Nintendo or Sony back in the '90s. But if you want to take that risk, go right ahead, Square Enix. It's your company. You deserve the sales. You deserve the exposure. I've always been there with Square Enix with its movies like the Final Fantasy VII movies and the games like Dirge of Cerberus, Final Fantasy VII from 1997. Sooner or later, I'm going to get the remakes integrate for the PS5 if I get the PS5 system next month or so to this friend of mine. So it's going to be like an interesting set of competition they're going to set for themselves against other gaming studios in the long term. But then it's like the economy, how it is in the United States and all, especially, because Square Enix, yes, it's located in Japan or its operations are in Japan most likely, but in the United States, like we're kind of like falling short on the economy and all. So they got to take a big. They basically taking a big risk at this rate. That's all I got to say. So
Yeah. Um, I guess they figure they're going multi-platform because just sticking to one is not working anymore.
yeah,
So they're probably trying to get new players that at least have the money to buy games. So they're probably figuring, we're leaving a lot of money on the table if we don't jump to PC, if we don't. Uh, and I mean, could you imagine seeing Final Fantasy games in Steam, the Steam store?
oh, yeah. Holy shit! Like Final Fantasy 7 and 8, 9, all
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
So that I guess that's what they're doing. But at the same time, it's kind of like whatever we think they're doing, it's kind of like they should have done it by now.
Oh yeah,
What, was it really, or was it really that they thought our key was to be on one specific platform, exclusive to one platform, whether it be Nintendo during the 80s and 90s, or PlayStation since like 99, and the 2000s. My years might be off. But it's maybe, but at the same time, their games are good. So it's not like their games aren't fun to play. At least a lot of people are liking those games. It's just they're not bringing in the numbers. But like Doctor Games 101 said at the same time, these games, at this, it's a horrible time economy wise.
yeah. Did it back like 10 years ago, put it on all platforms across all the platforms. We talk about Nintendo. What's it called? Nintendo GameCube and Nintendo Wii U and all, and then as well with PlayStation 2. They did, of course. So it's back then, of course, that could be worth it back then, but now it's like you're just taking a big risk at the same time. So,
Yeah. Ready to move on?
if I can say this stuff about Square
Okay.
Enix at all, I just want to say that I've been a big follower, and not a big follower, but I've been following their Square Enix Square Soft for years now through the games itself, like the Final Fantasy games and all. And I may not be there to buy every single Square Enix game, obviously, but I've seen the progression. They merged into a company back in the late 2000s, early 2010s. I was called Square Enix ever since. So it's Final Fantasy 13 and all. They had a good launch of that particular game. So it's I've always wanted to make sure they're always doing good because they're very distinct. They have a distinct culture in and of itself with different idealized type of games. Like they always get better and better and better with certain games that come out over the decades. And it's hard. It would suck to see them go out of business. Once again, not once again, but to merge to some other company.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's all I gotta say.
Okay.